Welcome to Forthright. I'm Sulani Madsen, reading a recent column that I wrote on Proposition 1 on the ballot only in the city of Spokane. The column, as published last week on October 19, 2023 in the Spokesman-Review, with commentary to follow. Headlined, Put Children First on Proposition 1. Proposition 1 in the city of Spokane exposes the ideological divide between municipal candidates. Proponents and opponents both have pieces of the truth on their side, but have different priorities in evaluating the trade-offs. Proposition 1 supporters put the rights of children first, opponents put adults first. The anti-camping ordinance, and yes, it is anti-camping, can just as truthfully be called a pro-child proposition, depending on how one wants to spin the story. Pro-child Proposition 1 gives tools to law enforcement to ask squatters within 1,000 feet of any public or private school, public park, playground, or licensed child care facility to move along. If uncooperative, illegal campers would be subject to a misdemeanor citation. Will this shuffle people around the city from places they have been urban camping to new locations in other neighborhoods? Of course it will. The proposed ordinance would limit camping in somewhere between 40 to 60% of the city, according to opponents of Proposition 1, depending on how one interprets the data and draws the lines. Law enforcement realistically isn't going to be out measuring neighborhoods for 1,000-foot perimeters to children's safe places. But if called, law enforcement officers will have another tool to nudge a recalcitrant adult toward accepting help via community court. The stubbornly homeless will readily adapt. People persistently living on the street carry maps in their heads of the best places to hide out to sleep undisturbed and the timetable for free meals at each service provider. They know how to stay below the radar and duck attention from law enforcement. Word will get out among those who refuse to use shelters. They'll adjust, and those who choose only to make trouble for themselves will still be left alone. Adults have a right to make poor choices. In January, as a volunteer with the Point in Time Count team of student nurses, we encountered a woman with serious foot swelling, dressed in a raggedy assortment of clothing to keep warm, and a bit daft, but not enough to be involuntarily admitted to care. She needed help, but chose to refuse assistance. We had to walk away. It was a hard lesson for the young student handing out dry socks. We too readily let the mentally ill die with their rights on, as the late psychiatrist and political pundit Charles Krauthammer famously put it. They'll have their rights even if they have no boots. Proposition 1 gives law enforcement and behavioral health unit team members another basis to intervene with adults insisting on exercising their rights to their own detriment. But children have rights too. Among them are safety, security, and an environment free of needles, foil wrappers, and drug residue. While many of the homeless are a danger only to themselves, drug use is rampant, and a higher proportion than in the general population would flunk a child care background check for violent or sexually abusive behaviors. It is not unreasonable to protect children by keeping illegal urban campers away from schools, parks, and playgrounds. The opponents of Proposition 1 advocate for the right of adults to bodily autonomy over the right of children to a safe life. As Vice President of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood of Greater Washington and North Idaho, Paul Dillon has supported adults' rights first since 2015. Lisa Brown, Kitty Klitsky, Lindsay Shaw, and Betsy Wilkerson have all gone on record as opposing anti-camping Proposition 1 because it doesn't address root causes of illegal camping, while at the same time admitting it will probably pass because people are fed up with the crime associated with rampant homelessness. Dillon's opponent, Katie Treloar, plus Mayor Nadine Woodward, Earl Moore, Michael Cathcart, and Kim Pleas all support pro-child Proposition 1. It is true it doesn't address the root causes of homelessness, which are many and complex, but it does address a more immediate duty to protect children while working on digging out those roots. We don't let children make all the choices because adulting is hard. It requires tough trade-offs, and adults have a duty to make choices to protect children. Children have a right to opportunities for recreation without being confronted by indecent exposure and squatter tents at the edge of the playground. Children don't have a vote. As for those maps promoted by the opponents to Proposition 1 who say it creates too many barriers to illegal camping, here's a better use for that data. The adults in the room can work together to figure out why only 40 to 60% of the city has facilities to serve children within a short walking distance in their neighborhoods. So, almost without exception, people want good things for their children and the neighbor's children. We can differ on how to define good and what that looks like translated into public policy. And I recognize that progressive advocates seek what's good for children by shaping society in a certain way that feels empathetically more socially just, usually defined by greater equality of outcomes. Conservatives also want what's good for children, requiring more equality of opportunity and individual responsibility to get there. In the book, Who Really Cares?, Arthur Brooks dug into the question and found conservatives play out their empathy in individual actions in privately supported institutions. Pro-life pregnancy centers are an example of charity and supportive principles. And if anyone knows of a private, secular charity providing similar services to mothers, let me know. You won't find any examples. They are driven by those conservative principles. Progressives emphasize public actions, group responsibility, and tax-supported institutions. And of course, we need to take public actions. There is group responsibility in some areas, and we all have benefits from some kinds of tax-supported institutions. But while writing this column, I kept thinking about one of the most annoying charges that pro-abortion, pro-choice zealots use when arguing with Republicans, thinking it's a mic drop moment. So today I'm going to drop the mic. The next time somebody in Democratic Party leadership insists only their side cares about children after they're born, remind them of who led the opposition to pro-child Proposition 1. It's a progressive money pile opposing the City of Spokane's Proposition 1 when you look at the Public Disclosure Commission website. But more on that when I record commentary for the column published this morning on Spokane County's Measure 1. And that's Spokane County's Measure 1 is the one that would provide a 0.2% sales tax funding stream for the county and all of the municipalities in Spokane County to use over the next 30 years as they continue having to address questions of jail and mental health and behavioral health services to folks who come into contact with the criminal justice system. And here's my pitch for support for local news. If you were a digital subscriber to the Spokesman-Review, you'd get to read every column the same day it hits print. So please feel free to share this link with friends who haven't voted yet. And as always, you're invited to subscribe to my Substack for notifications of new content, either with or without a pledge.